Hey everybody, this video is going to be an update of my little homemade DSLR adapter, which as you can see is very homemade. And I've just made it out of a standard dovetail, which in this case it's a 13-inch dovetail. It's just one that comes with most of your telescope mounts and what have you that have them. But I wanted to find a way to put just a camera on, and you can buy specialized dovetails and stuff for them, but this way is a lot cheaper, and I know a lot of people are wanting to do it cheap, so I wanted to see what I could pull off. And I've kind of altered it, and from the original video I made, you might see that I've elevated this quite a bit by like about 2 or 3 inches. Now I've got a lot more room to get my hands under here for when I'm tightening the screws on. In this case I've got a Nikon D50, which is an old 6 megapixel DSLR I found cheap on eBay, and right here is a very cheap 400 millimeter lens. I haven't had a chance to try it with the stars yet, but now that I've got this set up, if I get a clear sky I'm going to do it. Only paid like $30 for it. I'd like to get a Nikon one sometime, but Nikon 400 millimeter is pretty pricey. This thing, like I say, I think I paid $35 for it. It's a Spiratone, so who knows what it'll look like. I've taken a few pictures with it just outside of like some birds and turtles and stuff, and it's not half bad. If you notice, I've got it's just got standard 1/4 by 20 screws to go in here. Matter of fact, I bought some all thread. I haven't used these new ones yet, but I went to my local hardware store and found some 1/4 by 20. These particular ones here are 3 inches long, so I'll like that. What I really like about this idea, I can thread it into the camera, in this case the lens base and the camera base, before I put it in. Then it's easier to line up with the holes. And then I'll just put a wing nut on down here. And in this case, if you notice underneath here, underneath the lens part, there's a gap. I've got just flat washers as spacers, so this is level, so it's not cranked in a bind and doesn't mess anything up. But it's on there quite solid. And it looks, it's very cheap. I just used like 1/4 inch bolts right here. And these particular ones are, I think, 6 inches long, so I was really able to elevate it some. And I've got the one bolt goes through the dovetail, the existing hole in it, so I didn't have to drill any holes in my dovetail, and I got that way on each end. And then I've got another one here that just goes through wood only, and that's just to keep things from turning, because these things will start spinning. So I've done that on each end. And up front, this here's really slapped on. It's not very square, but I've got the little dovetail shoe for, like, if I want to put my green laser on, I can do that and help line up, which comes in handy because especially like in this one here, this is f6. It's a lot darker in here looking through this at night than you might expect with a lot of things, and that makes it hard to see stars and stuff and get them lined up. Now, bright star, it's pretty easy to see in there, but that'll help me when I'm calibrating to get everything set up so I can find objects. You can also put a guide scope up here, or a finder scope. Here I've got a guide scope on here. I haven't had a chance to use this very much. I'm still learning to guide, and I'm getting a little better, but this is an Orion 60 millimeter guide scope with the Orion camera. And I've thought about getting a longer piece of wood here. I might get a longer piece of wood here so I can get this farther away. I just want to make sure that nothing from coming off the back of the camera hits here, because this is a little close here with if I have wires coming out, connectors, You don't want anything to run into the mount when you're slewing. It might make everything stall out, and it could break your connectors off too. Now I can, with this setup, I can still move this forward quite a ways, so that's good. And then of course you have a balance issue to concern with. So I'll show you something I've made there that you can do. Here's another very do-it-yourself idea. These great big flat washers I picked up at a hardware store. These here are what, a couple inches in diameter. About 8 of these weigh 1 pound. Or if you're over in the UK, you need about 16 of them to get a kilogram. But and I've just got, I made extra holes in my base there on each end. So I've got down here on the tail end, so I can put weights down here on this end if I need to. And then I've got another hole up here. I can put weight up here on this end if I need to. And that's also one of the reasons I wanted to raise this up. I wanted to raise it up so I could get my hands in, and also I could put weight here and keep it away from the camera lens and everything, so I can do that. So I can easily add 2 or 3 pounds on each end. And you know, I can just change it around depending on what you have set up. That's one thing that's really neat about this idea and using these washers. You know, with this camera lens and setup's really pretty light. I've also got a Nikon 300mm lens, an f4.5, which is really nice. I'll get it and show it to you. So that it weighs quite a bit different, and I would want, you know, to change my sliding on that possibly, or the weights, so you can kind of tune it to whatever you happen to put on here. Okay, so now I've got this Nikon 300mm lens mounted on with this nice little lens head, and this is an old lens. Okay, this is actually from days of film. This lens, they call it Series H, and it's manual focus. They were made, I think, between 1969 and 1974, so it's close to 50 years old. And I was able to find it on eBay for like $65 or something. And what I really like about a lens like this, I can just set the focus ring to infinity. That's one of the big advantages of using these old lenses. You don't have to worry about focus as long as you've got a lens that's compatible with your camera. And that is something you want to watch if you go buying old vintage lenses and putting it on a new digital camera. Check out your owner's manual and everything. Some of them won't work right. They don't have, what it amounts to is the space between the back of the lens, or at least the focal point, whatever, and where this imaging chip is, needs to be the same as what it was with film cameras where they had the film. And in this case it is. So the imaging chip is just as deep into the camera as the film was back in the old days, so it gets right on there. But definitely read up on it, you know, from your manufacturer if you go buying them. Some of them you may not get focus, and some of them I've read on some cameras, when the little mirror inside the camera flips up and down when you take a picture, that mirror could hit the back of the lens and break the mirror, and then you'd really be hating it. So definitely watch what you're doing. Now you notice this lens seems a lot smaller than that 400 that I just had on there, but this lens by itself weighs more than the camera and that other lens. This was a good lens. I mean, people spent a lot of money on them back in the old days, and now since it's not automated, a lot of people aren't interested in them, but they're really good lenses. And let's see, I've gone ahead here, I've got that new all thread I got, which that's pretty long. Those were 3 inches. And I've put spacers in again, and I've got spacers under both at this point. The bolts here, I want to make sure it doesn't hit the lens, and also I've bought a little SV Boney, I guess is how you say it, one of those new brand names, dew heater. I'll get it and show it to you. So here is this SV Boney brand of dew heater strap, and it's got a little Velcro on it so you can wrap it around the lens, and the other end here just plugs into USB, and it's got a little controller here on it, which all it amounts to is it's just got a button you push and it changes which LED lights up. It can be on low, it can be on medium, or it can be on high. I've only used it once so far, and well, I didn't get dew. I don't know how good it'll be in the winter time as far as frost. I guess I'll find out. But that's something that sounds interesting, and I want to put one on my guide scope as well, because if you start getting dew or frost on there, you'll lose your guide star, and then you just won't be guiding anymore. It'll get lost. Now I've put on a Nikon 200mm f4 lens. This is another Series H that I found for a bargain on eBay, and I've used it a little bit just to play with, and it looks pretty nice. I haven't had a chance to really use it much. But this one here, the lens does not have a tripod socket in it, just a camera. And one of my concerns was, even if I tighten this up good, it might start to slip. Now, of course, I'm exaggerating the amount of movement, even though it really could happen that much. But if you even get just a tiny bit, it'll start streaking your stars. Because depending on how you have this aimed, if you have your tripod, like say if you're tracking along and you start getting over this way, well, it may start to loosen itself up. The weight of the lens may cause it to loosen, and if you're on the other side, it could conceivably cause it to tighten, and it might be a tiny little movement. So I've made another little El Cheapo adapter, kind of a block, to try to help prevent that. I'll put that on there. Now my solution for this, just a cheap piece of wood, and I've got a couple holes drilled in it, and there's also a couple holes drilled here, and I'm going to mount it back here, put a couple of screws through there with wing nut or what have you on there. Oops, if I don't drop it. So all I've done here is just made something that I can put right behind there, just to kind of give it a little extra support. And I'm not going to get this one tightened up necessarily, but I'll have two of them in here. I may have to adjust my hole positions too a little bit. So basically all I'd do is have it there, get another wing nut or nut on here on that end, get it snugged up, and if it's pressed up good enough, it should prevent this from moving. Right now I can move it. I'll have to see how good it works in real life. I may have to play with it. This idea may or may not work as good as I want it to. Now this little piece of wood that I've come up with the idea to put on the back of here is just part of life in the do-it-yourself world. I'm not real sure about how good it's going to work. I can still move it around some. What it amounts to is I don't have it perfectly flush up here. Now as far as the overall results of how I've been happy with making this DSLR mount deal here, been really good. I've been really happy with it. It's worked great with my 300mm lens, having two screws in there to hold it steady. Like I say, I can play with the weight balance on it if I want and get it balanced how I want. So if I want to sometime maybe do one of the things I want to do is some wider stuff too. I want to try like an entire constellation or something, maybe big Milky Way shots or all of the Orion constellation. So I want to try like 50mm lens and stuff like that. Another thing I want to mention, a lot of you probably already noticed, I left this camera strap on here. Especially with a go-to mount, I got to make sure when I'm using this that I have this thing secured somehow. Because if this thing's dangling, it could come around when you're slewing and hook onto something and cause it to stall out, and it cause you lots of problems. It'd ruin your night for a while.